The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of Willow Creek's only hotel, kicking up dust that swirled in the late afternoon sunlight. 24-year-old Tallulah Blackburn clutched her small carpet bag tightly as she stepped down, her legs wobbly after 3 days of travel. At 6 feet tall in her stockinged feet, she towered over the driver who offered his hand, then quickly averted his eyes when she stood to her full height. "Welcome to Willow Creek, madam," he mumbled, already turning away to retrieve the rest of her luggage. Tallulah straightened her travel-worn dress and took a deep breath. Colorado Territory, 1876. Her new home, or at least it would be, if Mr. Joseph Fleming still wanted her as his bride. His letters had been kind and articulate, describing his cattle ranch and his desire for a sensible, hard-working wife to share his life. She'd been forthright in her correspondence, mentioning her unusual height, but perhaps he hadn't fully understood what tall truly meant in her case. The small mining town bustled with activity despite its remote location. Men in dusty clothes moved purposefully along the boardwalks, tipping their hats when they noticed her. A few stopped to stare openly at her height before hurrying on their way. Miss Blackburn, a thin man with spectacles, approached, consulting a pocket watch. "I'm Albert Dunn, Mr. Fleming's business associate. He sent me to collect you." Tallulah nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. "Yes, that's me. How do you do, Mr. Dunn?" The man's eyes widened slightly as he took in her height. "Goodness, you're quite substantial, aren't you?" He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, I have the wagon just over there. Mr. Fleming is waiting at his home." She followed him silently, her stomach twisting with familiar dread. She'd seen that look countless times before: surprise, discomfort, and that quick calculation behind the eyes that measured her worth against her unconventional stature. The ride to Fleming's ranch was tense and mostly silent. When they finally pulled up to a modest but well-maintained farmhouse, Tallulah saw a short, balding man waiting on the porch, hands clasped behind his back. Joseph Fleming's smile faded as she stepped down from the wagon. His eyes traveled up and up, taking in her full height with undisguised shock. "Miss Blackburn," he said, his voice strained. You didn't mention in your letters that you were quite so tall," she finished for him. "I believe I did, Mr. Fleming. Several times." He tugged at his collar. "Well, yes, but I assumed you meant taller than average. Not this." He gestured vaguely at her entire person. Humiliation burned through her. "I see." Fleming conferred quietly with Albert, casting furtive glances her way. Finally, he approached her again, not quite meeting her eyes. "Miss Blackburn, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I don't believe this arrangement will work out after all. You're just not suitable for my situation." He pressed some coins into her hand. "This should cover your return journey. Albert will take you back to town." Tallulah stood frozen, clutching the money, as Fleming retreated into his house without another word. She had come all the way from Boston for this, spent her last savings, left her position as a seamstress, endured the grueling journey west only to be rejected within minutes of arriving. The return journey to town was even more uncomfortable than the trip out. Albert cleared his throat several times as if to speak, but ultimately said nothing. When they reached the hotel, he helped unload her trunks but couldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry about this misunderstanding, Miss Blackburn," he finally muttered. "There's a stage heading east in 3 days. Until then, you can stay here." He gestured to the hotel. Tallulah squared her shoulders. "And if I choose not to return east?" Albert looked startled. "Well, Willow Creek is a small town, miss. There aren't many opportunities for a woman alone." "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Dunn. I'll manage." Once alone in her small hotel room, Tallulah allowed herself to cry, silent tears streaming down her face. She'd endured ridicule and rejection her entire life due to her height, but this cut deeper. She had genuinely hoped for a fresh start, a chance to build a life with someone who might come to care for her. After washing her face, she sat by the window, watching the town's activities as dusk fell. She had enough money for a week at the hotel and perhaps a ticket back east, but the thought of returning in shame was unbearable. In Boston, she'd been that unnaturally tall Blackburn girl. She refused to go back to that life. The next morning, Tallulah put on her best dress, a deep green that complemented her hazel eyes, and set out to find work. The general store had no positions available. The seamstress shop already had 2 assistants. The schoolhouse had a teacher. By midday, her hopes had dimmed considerably. Outside the Silver Dollar Saloon, she hesitated. A saloon was hardly a respectable workplace, but she was growing desperate. As she deliberated, the doors swung open, and a tall man backed out, dragging another man by the collar. When Hank says no credit, he means no credit, the tall man growled, depositing the drunk unceremoniously in the dirt. Sleep it off, Parker. Turning around, he nearly collided with Tallulah. Even at her height, she had to look up slightly to meet his eyes, bright blue and currently widened in surprise. "Excuse me, madam," he said, tipping his hat. His voice was deep and rich, with a hint of a southern drawl. "It's quite all right," she replied, stepping aside. He didn't immediately move on, as most men did. Instead, he studied her face openly, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He was broad-shouldered and ruggedly handsome, with dark blonde hair and a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw. "You're new in town," he stated rather than asked. "Yes, just arrived yesterday." "And already considering the silver dollar?" His tone wasn't judgmental, merely curious. Tallulah lifted her chin. "I'm looking for work, actually." "At the saloon?" His eyebrows rose. "If necessary." "I find myself unexpectedly unemployed." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're the mail order bride for Joseph Fleming." Heat rushed to her cheeks. "News travels fast." "Small town." He shrugged. "Fleming's a fool." The simple statement, delivered matter-of-factly, caught her off guard. "I beg your pardon?" "Any man who'd send a woman like you away because of something as insignificant as height is a damned fool." He extended his hand. "Garrett Blackwell. I own the Circle B Ranch about 5 miles west of town." Tallulah hesitated before taking his hand. "Tallulah Blackburn." His grip was firm and warm. "Miss Blackburn, if you're looking for honest work, I might have a position for you. My housekeeper left last month to care for her ailing mother in Denver. Place has been a disaster since." She withdrew her hand, suspicious of his motives. "You're offering me a job as your housekeeper? Unless you'd prefer dealing with drunk cowboys at the Silver Dollar." His eyes twinkled. "Pays fair. You'd have your own room, and I promise to behave like a gentleman. Why would you offer employment to a complete stranger?" Garrett shrugged. "I need a housekeeper." "You need work. And," he paused, a genuine smile spreading across his face, "it's nice not to have to crane my neck looking down when talking to someone for a change." Despite herself, Tallulah smiled back. There was something disarmingly honest about him. "I should warn you, Mr. Blackwell. I'm a better seamstress than housekeeper." "Can you cook?" "Basic meals, yes." "Can you keep a house from falling into complete disarray?" "I believe so." "Then you're already an improvement on my current situation." He gestured down the street. "I'm heading back to the ranch this afternoon. If you're interested, gather your things and meet me at the general store in 2 hours." Tallulah considered her options. She could continue searching for work in a town where she was already known as the too-tall mail-order bride. Try her luck at the saloon, spend her dwindling funds on a ticket back east, or accept this unexpected offer. "I'll need to know the exact terms of employment before I agree," she said carefully. "Of course. $10 a week, room and board included. Sundays off if you want them. If after a month either of us finds the arrangement unsatisfactory, we part ways, no hard feelings." It was a fair offer, more than fair, actually. But Tallulah had learned to be cautious. "And what exactly would my duties entail, Mr. Blackwell?" "Cooking, cleaning, laundry, general household management." He met her gaze directly. "Nothing improper, Miss Blackburn. I'm offering you a job, not anything else." The sincerity in his voice was convincing. 2 hours at the general store, then. Garrett tipped his hat again. "Looking forward to it." As he walked away, Tallulah noticed several townspeople watching their interaction with undisguised interest. Whatever her decision, it would likely be the subject of gossip before sundown. But for the first time since arriving in Willow Creek, she felt a flicker of hope. True to his word, Garrett was waiting outside the general store when Tallulah arrived with her luggage. He loaded her trunks onto his wagon while she settled her bill at the hotel. "Heard Fleming rejected you for being too tall," said the hotel proprietor's wife as she handed over the change. "His loss, if you ask me. That man's been particular about everything since his first wife died." "Thank you." Tallulah replied, not sure what else to say. The woman leaned forward conspirationally. Garrett Blackwell's a good man. Keeps to himself mostly, but fair in his dealings. Lost his wife and baby in childbirth about 3 years back. Some say that's why he built his ranch so far from town. Tallulah nodded, filing away this information. It explained the fleeting sadness she'd glimpsed behind his easy smile. The journey to the Circle B Ranch took just over an hour. As they rode, Garrett pointed out landmarks and shared information about the area, which trails to avoid during spring floods, which ridge was home to a mountain lion, which valley held the best wildflowers in May. His deep voice was pleasant, and he seemed comfortable with occasional silences, never pushing for conversation. The ranch itself was larger than Tallulah had expected. A sprawling main house constructed of sturdy logs and stone sat on a gentle rise, with several outbuildings, corrals, and a large barn spread out behind it. Cattle grazed in the distance, and the entire property was nestled against a backdrop of towering mountains. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely as he helped her down from the wagon. "Thank you. Built most of it myself." Pride warmed his voice. "Come on inside. I'll show you where you'll be staying." The interior of the house reflected both craftsmanship and neglect. The structure itself was impressive: high ceilings, solid wood floors, well-crafted furniture, but dust covered most surfaces. Dishes were piled in the kitchen, and laundry overflowed from a basket near the back door. "I warned you it was a disaster," Garrett said, looking slightly embarrassed. "It's nothing that can't be fixed," Tallulah assured him, already mentally organizing the tasks ahead. He showed her to a pleasant bedroom off the kitchen. It was small but comfortable, with a single bed, dresser, washstand, and a window overlooking a small kitchen garden that had seen better days. "The previous housekeeper, Mrs. Simmons, kept that garden," he explained, following her gaze. "I've managed to kill most of it since she left. I know a little about gardening. I could try to revive it." "I'd appreciate that." He set down her carpet bag. "I'll bring in your trunks. Take some time to settle in. There's a pump in the kitchen and one out back for water. Outhouse is behind the house, though I've started building proper indoor facilities, just haven't finished yet." Once alone, Tallulah sat on the bed, feeling a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. The job seemed legitimate, and Garrett Blackwell appeared to be exactly what he claimed: a rancher in need of a housekeeper. But she'd traveled halfway across the country to marry one man, only to end up working for another. It wasn't the future she'd imagined. Still, the alternative was worse. Here, at least, she had purpose and a roof over her head. And perhaps, in time, she could save enough to establish herself independently. She changed into a simpler dress and pinned her dark auburn hair into a practical bun before heading to the kitchen. If she was to be a housekeeper, she might as well start earning her keep. By the time Garrett returned from the barn, she'd cleared the dishes, wiped down the kitchen surfaces, and had a pot of stew simmering on the stove. He stopped in the doorway, surprise evident on his face. "You didn't have to start working right away. I prefer keeping busy," she replied, cutting biscuits for the oven. "Besides, we both need to eat." A slow smile spread across his face. "Well, it already smells better than anything I've managed to cook in weeks." During dinner, eaten at the kitchen table, Tallulah learned more about the ranch. Garrett ran it with the help of just 3 cowhands: Miguel, Jack, and a young man named Thomas who lived in a bunkhouse near the barn. The ranch wasn't the largest in the territory, but the cattle were quality stock, and he was slowly building a reputation for fair deals and good breeding. "The men usually take their meals in the bunkhouse," he explained. "Miguel's wife, Elena, cooks for them, but they come to the main house for Sunday dinner and special occasions. So I'll only be cooking for you most days. And yourself, of course." He looked up from his stew. "This is delicious, by the way." "Thank you. It's just a simple recipe. After weeks of my own cooking, simple tastes like heaven." His easy compliments made her uncomfortable, not because they seemed insincere, but because they were delivered so naturally, without any apparent agenda. She wasn't used to straightforward kindness from men. After dinner, Garrett insisted on helping with the dishes despite her protests. "My mother would haunt me if I let a woman cook and clean up alone on her first day under my roof," he said firmly, rolling up his sleeves. As they worked side by side, Tallulah became acutely aware of their height difference, or rather, the lack of it. At 6'3", Garrett was only a few inches taller than her. For someone accustomed to towering over most men, it was a novel experience to feel almost normal. "May I ask you something, Mr. Blackwell?" "Garrett, please." "And yes. Why did you really offer me this position? Surely there are women in town who need work." He paused, drying a plate with methodical care. "Truth. Always. When I saw you standing outside the Silver Dollar, looking like you were gathering courage to walk through those doors despite clearly not belonging there, I admired your grit." He set the plate down. "Then I heard you were Fleming's mail order bride, and he'd turned you away because of your height." A flash of anger crossed his features. "That made me downright mad. No one should be judged for things they can't control. You took pity on me, then?" "No, madam." His blue eyes met hers directly. "I recognized someone who didn't deserve the hand they'd been dealt. And I had a job that needed filling. Simple as that." Tallulah wasn't entirely convinced, but she nodded. "Well, whatever your reasons, I appreciate the opportunity. Just don't thank me when you're elbow deep in my laundry tomorrow," he said with a grin. The following days established a routine. Tallulah rose early to prepare breakfast, then tackled the accumulated disorder of the house one room at a time. Garrett was gone most days from dawn until dusk, working the ranch with his men. He returned for the midday meal when he could, but often ate on the range. By the end of her first week, the main living areas were clean and organized, and she'd made significant progress on the mountain of laundry. The kitchen garden was weeded, though many plants were beyond saving. She made lists of household supplies needed from town and learned the rhythms of the ranch. She also learned more about Garrett through small observations. He always removed his hat and boots before entering the house. He read voraciously in the evenings, everything from dime novels to Shakespeare. He whistled while he worked, usually old folk tunes. He carved wood in his spare time, creating small, intricate figures of animals and people. And he never, not once, made her feel self-conscious about her height. One evening, as they sat on the porch after dinner, he asked about her life before coming west. "Not much to tell," she said, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "My parents died when I was 16. Influenza. I had no siblings, so I went to live with my mother's cousin in Boston. She was kind enough, but space was tight with her own 5 children. I worked as a seamstress in a dress shop until you answered Fleming's advertisement," Garrett finished. "Yes, it seemed like an opportunity for a fresh start." She sighed. "Clearly, I was mistaken." "Why did you choose Fleming's advertisement?" Tallulah hesitated, then decided honesty was best. His letters were intelligent and respectful. He described wanting a partnership, not just a housekeeper or broodmare. And he mentioned being a widower who'd loved his wife deeply. "I thought that meant he understood the value of companionship beyond appearances." Garrett nodded thoughtfully. Fleming's first wife was tiny, barely 5 feet tall. Maybe he couldn't imagine anything different. Perhaps. She smoothed her skirt. "It doesn't matter now. Have you always been tall?" he asked, changing the subject slightly. A small smile curved her lips. "I outgrew my father when I was 14. By 16, I was taller than most men in our church congregation. My mother used to say God gave me extra height because I had extra spirit to contain." Garrett laughed, a warm, rich sound. "I like that. My grandmother used to say something similar about me. Called me her sturdy sapling, even when I was already taller than her." "Were you close to your grandmother?" "Very. She raised me after my parents died in a fire when I was 8. His expression grew distant. "Taught me everything important: how to read and write, how to treat people, how to survive hard times." "She sounds remarkable." "She was." He glanced at Tallulah. "Like your mother, she believed height was a blessing, not something to be ashamed of." "It's easier for men," Tallulah pointed out. "Tall men are admired. Tall women are oddities. Only to small-minded people." The conviction in his voice was startling. They fell silent, watching night settle over the valley. Tallulah found herself wondering about Garrett's wife, what she had been like, whether he still mourned her deeply. The townspeople had mentioned her death, but Garrett himself never spoke of her. As if reading her thoughts, he said quietly, "My wife, Charlotte, was about your height. 6 feet even. People used to stare when we walked together." Tallulah looked at him in surprise. "I didn't know." "No reason you would." He leaned back in his chair. "She loved being tall. said it let her see farther than most people, like having a permanent advantage. A sad smile touched his lips. She was remarkable in every way. I'm sorry for your loss, Tallulah said softly. Thank you. He stood, stretching. It's getting late. I should let you rest. That night, Tallulah lay awake thinking about their conversation. In just 1 week, Garrett Blackwell had shown her more understanding and respect than most people had in her entire life. It was disconcerting and comforting all at once. She reminded herself firmly that he was her employer, nothing more. The fact that he had once loved a tall woman didn't mean anything regarding how he viewed her. Still, for the first time in years, she felt almost comfortable in her own skin. The following Sunday, Tallulah met the ranch hands when they came to the main house for dinner. Miguel was a quiet, dignified Mexican man in his 40s. Jack was a grizzled former soldier with a booming laugh. Thomas, barely 20, was eager to please and clearly idolized Garrett. Elena, Miguel's wife, arrived bearing a dish of spiced beans and warm tortillas to contribute to the meal. She was a plump, cheerful woman who immediately embraced Tallulah. So good to have another woman at Circle B, she exclaimed. These men, they need civilizing influence. The meal was lively, with the men sharing stories and jokes. Tallulah, usually reserved in group settings, found herself laughing more than she had in years. When she rose to clear the dishes, Elena shooed her back into her seat. No, men clean on Sunday, she insisted. Ranch rule. To Tallulah's astonishment, the men complied without complaint, clearing the table and washing dishes while she and Elena remained seated with coffee. Garrett's rule, Elena explained with a wink. From first day we come here, 3 years ago, he say Sunday is day of rest for women who work all week. That's unusually considerate. Elena nodded. Garrett is good man, different from most. His wife, she teach him well before she die. You knew Charlotte? For short time, yes. Beautiful woman, strong like mountain. Elena's eyes grew sad. Birth is dangerous time. Baby come wrong way, both die. Garrett, he almost died too, from broken heart. Tallulah glanced toward the kitchen, where Garrett was showing Thomas how to properly dry and stack plates. He seems to have recovered. Elena followed her gaze. Outside, yes. Inside. She tapped her chest. Still healing. Maybe always healing. But last few days, I see him smile more. She gave Tallulah a meaningful look. Elena, it's not. We're not. He's my employer. The older woman patted her hand. For now, yes. Life is long journey, señorita. Before Tallulah could respond, the men returned, and the conversation shifted to ranch business. But Elena's words stayed with her, along with the uncomfortable awareness that she was developing feelings for Garrett that went beyond employee-employer respect. As autumn progressed, Tallulah settled more comfortably into life at Circle B. The house was now immaculately maintained. With fresh curtains, she'd sewn herself hanging in the windows, and the pantry well-stocked for winter. She'd rescued what she could of the kitchen garden and was already planning what to plant in spring. Garrett took her to town once a week for supplies, and each trip was a small test of her resilience. The whispers followed them, speculation about their relationship, lingering gossip about her rejection by Fleming, sidelong glances at her height. Garrett seemed oblivious to it all, or perhaps he simply didn't care what others thought. One particular visit to town in late October proved more challenging than most. As they loaded supplies into the wagon, Joseph Fleming approached, his expression sour. Blackwell, he nodded curtly, then turned to Tallulah with barely concealed distaste. Miss Blackburn, I see you found alternative arrangements. Mr. Fleming, she acknowledged stiffly. Garrett stepped slightly closer to her side. Something you needed, Fleming? Just checking when you'll have those 2 bulls ready. The ones we discussed last month. Next week, as agreed. Garrett's tone was civil but cool. Fleming's gaze shifted between them, his lips curling slightly. Interesting choice of housekeeper, Blackwell. Though I suppose with your peculiar tastes. It makes sense. Tallulah felt her cheeks burn, but Garrett remained unruffled. Miss Blackburn has transformed my home and manages my household with exceptional skill, he said evenly. Your loss was very much my gain. Fleming's face reddened. Just have those bulls ready, he snapped before stalking away. I apologize for him, Garrett said quietly as they climbed into the wagon. You have nothing to apologize for. He had no right to speak to you that way. It's nothing I haven't heard before. She straightened her shoulders. Though I appreciate your defense. Garrett flicked the reins, guiding the horses out of town. It wasn't just defense, Tallulah. I meant what I said. You've brought order and warmth back to my home. I'm genuinely grateful. The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten. Thank you. They rode in companionable silence for a while before Garrett spoke again. Winter comes early in these mountains. Another month, maybe less, and we'll see the first heavy snow. I've been preparing. The root cellar is stocked, and I've put up preserves from what was salvageable in the garden. He smiled, always thinking ahead. That's one of the things I admire about you. The casual compliment sent a flutter through her chest that she tried desperately to ignore. The ranch can be isolated in winter, he continued. Sometimes the road to town is impassable for weeks. If that's concerning to you. It isn't, she assured him. I've always preferred quiet to crowds. Good. Me too. He glanced at her. Though I find I enjoy company more than I used to. The right company, at least. The implication hung in the air between them, neither acknowledging it directly. When they reached the ranch, they unloaded the supplies together, their hands occasionally brushing each small contact, sending awareness through Tallulah that both thrilled and frightened her. That evening, as she prepared dinner, Garrett came in from the barn earlier than usual. He'd washed up and changed his shirt, and there was a nervousness about him she hadn't seen before. Something smells wonderful, he said, hovering near the stove. Just a beef stew with dumplings. It'll be ready soon. He nodded, then cleared his throat. Tallulah, I was wondering if you might join me in the parlor after dinner. There's something I'd like to discuss. Her hand stilled on the spoon she was using to stir the stew. Is everything all right? Have I done something unsatisfactory? No, nothing like that. He ran a hand through his hair. It's a personal matter. Of course, she replied, puzzled. After dinner, then. Throughout the meal, Garrett was unusually quiet, responding to her questions about the day's work with distracted brevity. His nervousness was contagious, and by the time they finished eating, Tallulah's stomach was in knots. Was he planning to let her go? Had he found someone else for the position, someone less controversial than the woman Fleming had rejected? Or perhaps he simply wanted to clarify boundaries, sensing her growing attraction to him. After the dishes were done, she followed him to the parlor. He gestured for her to sit in one of the comfortable chairs while he remained standing, pacing slightly. Tallulah, he began, then stopped, seeming to gather his thoughts. You've been here almost 2 months now. Yes, she confirmed, bracing herself for bad news. When I hired you, I said we'd evaluate the arrangement after a month. I remember. He took a deep breath. The thing is, I find the arrangement entirely satisfactory from my perspective. More than satisfactory, actually. But I realized I never asked if you felt the same. Relief flooded through her. Oh, yes, I'm very content with my position here. Good. That's good. He nodded, still seeming unsettled. But that's not actually what I wanted to discuss. I see. She folded her hands in her lap, waiting. The fact is, Tallulah, I've come to care for you. As more than an employee. The words came out in a rush. I know it's inappropriate, given our current arrangement. I know it's too soon after your experience with Fleming, and I understand completely if you don't reciprocate. But I couldn't continue without being honest about my feelings. Stunned, Tallulah stared at him. Of all the scenarios she'd imagined, this was the one she'd allowed herself to hope for least. You care for me, she repeated, hardly trusting her ears. Yes. His blue eyes met hers directly. More each day. But what? The question seemed to surprise him. Why wouldn't I? You're intelligent, kind, hardworking. You face challenges with grace. You've brought life back to this house and to me, if I'm being entirely honest. Those are admirable qualities in a housekeeper, she pointed out. Not necessarily reasons to care for a woman romantically. Garrett moved closer, kneeling beside her chair, so they were at eye level. Then how about this? I love watching your mind work, how you solve problems methodically. I love your quiet strength. I love how you hum when you think no one's listening. I love the way sunlight catches the red in your hair. His voice softened. And I love that when you stand beside me, I can look into your eyes without either of us having to bend or stretch. Tears pricked at Tallulah's eyes. Garrett, I'm not asking for anything right now, he said quickly. I just wanted you to know. If you prefer to continue as we have been, I'll respect that completely. If you'd rather find another position, I'll provide excellent references. And if, by some chance, you might feel something similar. Hope flickered in his eyes. Tallulah's heart pounded. She had indeed developed feelings for Garrett, deeper feelings than she'd ever experienced. But fear held her back, fear of rejection, of being vulnerable, of believing in something too good to be true. I don't know what to say, she admitted finally. You don't have to say anything now. He stood, giving her space. Take all the time you need to think. Nothing needs to change unless you want it to. She nodded, grateful for his understanding. Thank you. That night, sleep eluded her. Garrett's confession replayed in her mind, along with all the small kindnesses and moments of connection they'd shared over the past weeks. She had come west seeking a husband, a partnership. Could fate have led her to the right man through such an unexpected path? By morning, she had made her decision. Garrett was already at the barn when she finished preparing breakfast. She wrapped a plate of food and carried it out to him, her heart racing with nervous anticipation. She found him in the tack room, mending a bridle with careful precision. He looked up when she entered, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. Brought you breakfast, she said, holding out the plate. Thank you. He set aside his work and took the food, but his eyes remained on her face, searching. Tallulah took a deep breath. I've been thinking about what you said last night. I meant every word. His voice was quiet but sure. I believe you, and that's what terrifies me. She clasped her hands together to keep them from trembling. I came here looking for a husband, it's true. But after Fleming's rejection, I promised myself I wouldn't put my heart at risk again. Disappointment shadowed his features, but he nodded. I understand. No, you don't. She stepped closer. Because despite that promise, I find myself caring for you in ways I never expected. You make me feel valued, seen, not despite my height, but as a complete person. Hope returned to his eyes. Tallulah, I'm afraid, she admitted. Afraid of believing this could be real. Afraid of being hurt again. But I'm more afraid of walking away from something that might be wonderful out of cowardice. Garrett set the plate aside and stood, moving slowly toward her, as if approaching a skittish colt. Are you saying there's a chance? I'm saying I care for you too. And I'd like to see where those feelings might lead slowly, carefully. The smile that spread across his face was brighter than the morning sun. I can do slow and careful. And I can't continue as your housekeeper if we're to explore this. He nodded immediately. Of course. We'll figure out an alternative arrangement. I can still help with the house while we determine what comes next, she offered. But not as your employee. Agreed. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, his calloused palm warm against hers. May I court you properly, Tallulah Blackburn? With all the respect and patience you deserve. She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. Yes, Garrett Blackwell. You may. The weeks that followed transformed their relationship. Garrett courted her with old-fashioned formality, bringing her wildflowers he found on the range, reading poetry aloud in the evenings, taking her on rides to show her beautiful spots on the ranch. He was patient and undemanding, letting her set the pace of their growing closeness. Tallulah continued managing the household, but now as a guest rather than an employee. She moved into a bedroom in the main part of the house, and Garrett hired a young woman from town, Sophie Miller, to come 3 days a week to help with the heavier cleaning. As the first snow blanketed the mountains, the ranch settled into its winter rhythm. The cattle were moved to lower pastures, supplies were checked and double-checked, and the house was prepared for the long, cold months ahead. On a clear December evening, Garrett took Tallulah on a sleigh ride across the snow-covered valley. Bundled in blankets against the chill, they glided under a sky brilliant with stars, their breath forming clouds in the frosty air. Charlotte and I used to do this, he said quietly, breaking a comfortable silence. Ride out on winter nights to look at the stars. It was the first time he'd spoken so directly about activities he'd shared with his late wife. Tallulah glanced at him, wondering if the memory brought pain. Does it make you sad, remembering? She asked gently. He considered the question. Not anymore. For a long time, every memory was like a knife. Now, it's more like holding something precious that you know you have to eventually set down. He looked at her, his expression open. I loved her completely. I always will. But my heart has room for new love too. Different, but just as real. Tallulah's throat tightened with emotion. Thank you for sharing that with me. He guided the sleigh to a stop in a small clearing surrounded by pine trees. The moonlight on snow created a luminous landscape of silver and shadow. I brought you here for a reason, Garrett said, securing the reins. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. I carved this for you. Tallulah opened it carefully. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, was a delicately carved wooden heart, polished to a warm glow. Etched into its surface were two figures, a man and a woman of equal height, standing together under a sky filled with stars. It's beautiful, she whispered, tracing the carving with her fingertip. Like you. He took her gloved hand in his. Tallulah, I know we agreed to move slowly, and I respect that. But I find myself more certain every day that what I feel for you is true and lasting. Her heart began to race. Garrett, I'm not proposing not yet, he clarified with a small smile. But I wanted you to know that's where my heart is heading. When you're ready, if you're ready, I hope you'll consider building a life with me. Not as my housekeeper, but as my wife and partner. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of joy. I think I'd like that very much. Someday. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't, he kissed her a gentle, tender kiss that spoke of respect and growing love. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. You're just the right height for me in every way, he murmured. Tallulah laughed softly. I've spent my whole life being too tall. It's strange to finally feel right. Not strange, he corrected. Perfect. They returned to the ranch with a new understanding between them. Though no formal promises had been made, both knew where their relationship was heading. Tallulah wrote to her cousin in Boston, sharing news of her new life and the unexpected turn it had taken. As winter deepened, the ranch became increasingly isolated. Days were spent in necessary work caring for livestock, maintaining equipment, preserving food stores, and evenings were for companionship. Garrett taught Tallulah to play chess. She taught him to make proper biscuits. They read books aloud, taking turns with chapters, and shared stories of their lives before they met. In January, a blizzard swept through the valley, confining everyone to their dwellings for 3 days. The howling wind and swirling snow created a cocoon around the main house, and in that peaceful isolation, Tallulah and Garrett grew even closer. On the third evening, as they sat before the fire in the parlor, Garrett asked about her journey west. Were you afraid, traveling alone? Terrified, she admitted, but also excited. I'd never been more than 50 miles from Boston before. What was the hardest part? She thought for a moment. The stairs. Being tall attracts attention anyway, but a tall woman traveling alone? People weren't subtle with their curiosity. Garrett nodded. I remember that from traveling with Charlotte. People can be thoughtless. Or cruel. She gazed into the fire. A woman in Kansas City told her daughter not to grow up freakish like me. She didn't bother lowering her voice. Anger flashed across Garrett's face. People fear what's different. It says more about them than you. I know that now. But for years, I believed something was wrong with me. She smiled ruefully. I used to pray to stop growing. When that didn't work, I developed a permanent stoop to appear shorter. Is that why you sometimes hunch your shoulders? He asked softly. She looked at him in surprise. I still do that. Occasionally. When you're uncomfortable or meeting someone new. Old habits. She straightened consciously. My mother used to tap between my shoulder blades and say, Stand tall, Tallulah. God made you to touch the sky. Garrett smiled. Wise woman. She was. Tallulah hesitated, then added. She also used to say the right man would see my height as a blessing, not a burden. Your mother was right about that too. He reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. Do you know what I thought the first time I saw you? That I was remarkably tall. He chuckled. No. Well, yes, but that wasn't my first thought. I thought, there's a woman who carries herself like a queen despite the world trying to make her feel less than. Your dignity struck me before your height did. Warmth spread through her chest. You have a gift for saying exactly what I need to hear. Not a gift, just the truth. He squeezed her hand. Tallulah, I love you. I've known it for weeks, but I wanted to be sure you were ready to hear it. The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound. Tallulah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of joy. I love you too, she whispered. I think I have since that day you defended me to Fleming. Garrett's smile was radiant. He moved from his chair to kneel before her, still holding her hand. Then I have a question for you. One I've been waiting to ask. Her heart skipped. Garrett, from his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet pouch. This was my grandmother's, he said, opening it to reveal a gold ring with a modest diamond. I've been carrying it since that night in the sleigh, waiting for the right moment. He looked up at her, his blue eyes filled with love and certainty. Tallulah Blackburn, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Not because you came west seeking marriage, not because it's convenient, but because we found something neither of us was looking for, a love that fits us perfectly. Tallulah's vision blurred with tears. Yes, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. Yes, I will marry you, Garrett Blackwell. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly and rose to take her in his arms. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepened with the promise of their shared future. When they finally parted, Garrett kept his arms around her. I promised your mother would be right, he said softly. The right man would see your height as a blessing. And are you that man? She asked, a teasing light in her eyes. Without question. He smiled against her hair. You're just the right height for my arms, Tallulah. You always will be. Spring came to the Colorado mountains in a rush of melting snow and new growth. The roads cleared, allowing travel to town again, and Garrett and Tallulah made the journey together to announce their engagement officially. The news was met with varying reactions. Elena and Miguel were delighted. Jack offered gruff congratulations. Young Thomas seemed mildly disappointed. Tallulah suspected he'd harbored a boyish crush on her, but wished them well. In town, the reaction was more mixed. Some offered sincere congratulations. Others whispered behind their hands. Joseph Fleming, encountered outside the general store, merely pressed his lips into a thin line and nodded curtly before walking away. Still thinks he dodged a bullet, Garrett muttered as they watched Fleming's retreating back. He did, Tallulah replied with a smile. I would have made him a terrible wife. And you'll make me an extraordinary one. They were married on a perfect May morning, with wildflowers carpeting the valley and the mountains standing as witnesses. The ceremony was small but joyful, held on the ranch with Reverend Simmons officiating. Elena had helped Tallulah sew her wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of ivory silk that emphasized her height rather than disguising it. As they exchanged vows, Tallulah thought of how far she had come, not just in miles from Boston to Colorado, but in her journey to self-acceptance. She had arrived in Willow Creek feeling rejected and uncertain. She stood now, proud and tall, beside the man who loved her exactly as she was. The celebration afterward was lively, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the evening. As dusk fell, Garrett led his bride away from the festivities toward the house, their home now in every sense. Happy, Mrs. Blackwell? He asked, his arm around her waist. Completely, Mr. Blackwell. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Though I still can't quite believe how everything turned out. Sometimes the best journeys take unexpected turns. He stopped at the porch steps and turned to face her. I have a wedding gift for you. You've already given me so much. One more thing. He took her hand and led her around to the side of the house, where the kitchen garden had been expanded into a larger plot. In the center stood a new structure, a small greenhouse constructed of wood and glass. Garrett, she exclaimed, stepping closer to examine it. It's beautiful. You mentioned wanting to grow herbs and vegetables year-round. He opened the door for her. This should make that possible, even in our mountain winters. Inside, shelves lined the walls, and a potting bench stood ready for use. The setting sun streamed through the glass, warming the small space. This is perfect, she said, turning to embrace him. Thank you. There's more, he admitted. Come inside the house. In the parlor, she found her second surprise, a rocking chair built to her proportions, with a higher back and deeper seat than standard. I made it myself, Garrett said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. For reading or sewing or whatever might come in the future. Tallulah ran her hand over the polished wood, noting the intricate carving along the arms, a pattern of stars, like those on the wooden heart he'd given her months ago. It's beautiful craftsmanship, she said, sitting to test it. The chair fit her perfectly. I want our home to be a place where you never have to stoop or squeeze or apologize for the space you occupy, Garrett said, kneeling beside the chair. Where everything fits you just right. Tears pricked her eyes. "You are an extraordinary man, Garrett Blackwell. Just a man who loves his extraordinary wife." He reached up to touch her cheek. "May I kiss you, Mrs. Blackwell?" "I believe that's your right now, Mr. Blackwell." Their kiss was sweet with promise, sealing the beginning of their life together. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch thrived under their combined care. Tallulah's greenhouse produced an abundance of herbs and vegetables. Garrett's cattle breeding program expanded successfully. Together, they built not just a home, but a partnership of equals. In July, they traveled to Denver for a livestock auction and stayed in a grand hotel. Walking arm in arm through the city, they still attracted glances, a striking couple of unusual height, but Tallulah no longer hunched her shoulders or tried to make herself smaller. She stood tall beside her husband, confident in who she was and in his love. One evening, as they prepared for bed in their hotel room, Garrett wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" he murmured. "Only 3 times," she replied with a smile. "You're falling behind schedule." He chuckled, the sound rumbling against her back. "I love you, Tallulah Blackwell. More today than yesterday." She turned in his arms to face him. "And I love you. For so many reasons, but especially for truly seeing me when others looked away. How could I look anywhere else?" He kissed her softly. "You are the most beautiful sight in my world." As summer faded into autumn, Tallulah made a discovery that filled her with both joy and trepidation. After a week of morning sickness, she consulted with the midwife in town and confirmed what she suspected: she was expecting a child. She shared the news with Garrett that evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. His initial joy was quickly tempered with concern, memories of Charlotte's death and childbirth clearly haunting him. "We'll take every precaution," she assured him, squeezing his hand. "Elena has already promised to help, and Mrs. Wilson is an experienced midwife." "I can't lose you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You won't." She placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "We're both strong, this baby and I. And we have something powerful on our side." "What's that?" "Love," she said simply. "Yours and mine and the whole community's. We're not alone in this, Garrett." He nodded, drawing her close. "Promise me you'll be careful. No heavy lifting, no." "I promise to be sensible," she interrupted with a smile. "But I won't sit idle for 7 months. This ranch needs us both." In the weeks that followed, Garrett was both attentive and maddening, insisting on helping with tasks she was perfectly capable of doing, hovering anxiously whenever she showed the slightest discomfort. Tallulah endured his protectiveness with patient understanding, knowing it came from love and fear. As winter approached again, her condition became more evident. Elena, who had borne 4 children of her own, provided practical advice and reassurance. Mrs. Wilson, the midwife, visited regularly and pronounced both mother and baby healthy. "You're built for childbearing," the older woman declared during one examination. "Good wide hips, strong constitution, nothing to worry about." These words comforted Garrett more than all of Tallulah's assurances. He still worried, but less obsessively, allowing her the independence she valued while ensuring she didn't overtax herself. On Christmas Eve, as they sat before the fire in the parlor, Tallulah felt the baby move for the first time, a distinctive flutter that made her gasp. "What is it?" Garrett asked instantly, alert to any sign of distress. "The baby," she said, placing his hand where she'd felt the movement. "Wait." After a moment, the flutter came again, stronger this time. Garrett's eyes widened in wonder. "That's our child," he whispered, awestruck. "Yes." She covered his hand with hers. "Our little tall tale in the making." He laughed, the tension of months easing from his shoulders. "Boy or girl, this child will stand head and shoulders above the rest." "Poor thing," she said with mock seriousness. "Destined to see the world from a different perspective." "Lucky child," he corrected. "To have parents who understand that being different is a strength, not a weakness." As they sat together, hands joined over the new life growing within her, Tallulah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Rejection had led to unexpected opportunity. Disappointment had opened the door to joy. And a man who might have been just another employer had become her partner, protector, and greatest advocate. "What are you thinking?" Garrett asked, noting her contemplative expression. that sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as misfortunes. She smiled. If Fleming hadn't rejected me for being too tall, I would never have found you. Then I owe Fleming a debt of gratitude. He kissed her forehead. His loss, my immeasurable gain. Spring brought renewal to the land and to the Blackwell family. On a bright April morning, after a relatively easy labor, Tallulah gave birth to a healthy daughter they named Grace Charlotte Blackwell. The baby was long-limbed and strong, with a lusty cry that announced her arrival to the world. Garrett, who had paced anxiously outside the bedroom during the birth, wept openly when Mrs. Wilson placed his daughter in his arms. "She's perfect," he whispered, looking from the baby to his exhausted but radiant wife. "You both are." As Grace grew from infant to toddler, it became clear she had inherited her parents' height. By her first birthday, she stood taller than most children months older. Strangers commented on her size, sometimes with the same thoughtless remarks Tallulah had endured throughout her life. But Grace, surrounded by love and acceptance, seemed unbothered by such comments. She walked early, ran faster, and climbed higher than other children her age, using her long limbs to her advantage. On Grace's second birthday, as family and friends gathered at the ranch to celebrate, Joseph Fleming appeared unexpectedly, a wrapped package in his hands. "Heard it was the little one's birthday," he said awkwardly when Garrett answered the door. "Thought she might like this." The gift was a beautifully crafted wooden rocking horse, sized larger than standard, perfect for a tall child. "Thank you," Garrett said, genuinely surprised. "Would you like to come in? Have some cake?" Fleming hesitated, then nodded. "Just for a minute." Inside, he watched as Grace unwrapped his gift and immediately climbed onto the rocking horse, her delighted laughter filling the room. "She's a fine child," he said to Tallulah, who stood nearby. "Going to be tall like her parents." "Yes, she is," Tallulah agreed, watching for any sign of the old judgment in his eyes. Instead, she saw something like regret. "I was wrong," Fleming said quietly. "About many things. I'm sorry for how I treated you when you arrived." The simple apology, delivered without excuses, touched her deeply. "Thank you, Mr. Fleming. That means a great deal." He nodded, uncomfortable with the emotion of the moment. "Well, I should be going. Just wanted to drop off the gift." As Garrett showed him out, Tallulah felt a sense of closure. Fleming's rejection had once seemed like the end of her hopes. Now she recognized it as the beginning of something far better than she could have imagined. That evening, after the guests had departed and Grace was asleep in her room, Tallulah and Garrett sat on the porch in the gathering twilight. His arm was around her shoulders, and her head rested comfortably against him. "Happy?" he asked, a question he still posed regularly, as if amazed by their good fortune. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "You? More than I ever thought possible." He turned to look at her, love evident in his eyes. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if Fleming had accepted you as his bride?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "But it's like wondering about a narrow escape. I'm grateful every day that his vision was too limited to see what was right in front of him." Garrett smiled. "His limitations became my blessing." He pulled her closer. "You know, when I first saw you outside that saloon, standing so tall and proud despite everything, I thought to myself, there's a woman who would fit perfectly in my arms." "And do I?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "Perfectly," he confirmed, demonstrating by wrapping both arms around her. "You're just the right height for my heart, Tallulah Blackwell. You always have been." As the stars appeared above the mountains, Tallulah thought of her mother's words, "Stand tall, Tallulah. God made you to touch the sky." For the first time in her life, she felt truly comfortable with her height, with her place in the world, with who she was meant to be. The girl who had been rejected for being too tall had found a love that measured her worth not in inches, but in character. The woman who had once stooped to appear smaller now stood proudly at her full height, confident in her husband's love and in her own value. And as the years passed, the Blackwell Ranch flourished, as did their family. Grace was joined by two brothers, Thomas and Samuel, both tall like their parents. They grew up understanding that differences were to be celebrated, not hidden, and that true love sees beyond physical appearance to the heart within. Tallulah and Garrett grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. And until the end of their days, they stood tall together, touching the sky, just as Tallulah's mother had predicted, and fitting perfectly in each other's arms, just as Garrett had known they would from the very beginning.